In itself, life, our entire existence, is a reflection of our creation, without purpose, without plan. Just a series of chaotic coincidences that gave just the right combination for our life. In the same way, you are alive by pure chance. It is estimated that throughout the life of an average adult man, he will produce more than 500 billion sperm, while a woman by the time she is 20 years old will have perhaps 3,000 eggs. Not did only those two people have to meet, but they have to meet at the exact moment. So of the more than 500 billion options that existed, you would be the one who lived. But it doesn't end there. After going through a pregnancy and childbirth without serious complications, you will still have to deal with some viruses that will endanger your life. Diseases, infections, accidents of all kinds, and finally the most dangerous factor you will face throughout your entire life: yourself. And it is not a saying, it is not to give it a poetic air. It is real. The three main causes of death worldwide are various heart problems, accidents including road, work, aviation and domestic accidents. And although it may seem incredible, one of those causes is you. And here is the power of depression, capable of making the main danger you will face throughout your life be your own mind, that part that no matter how annoying and harmful it becomes, you cannot avoid or turn off at will. That is why it is important to understand what is happening up there, because you cannot ignore it no matter how hard you try. Sooner or later you will be left alone with your thoughts, with no one around to serve as a distraction. Those thoughts that make you feel bad will return, your mind will attack you, and you will not know how to defend yourself, because until that moment you only learn how to distract yourself. I will divide this part into later distraction as a solution, and that the mind tries to attack you whenever it has free time. I found a curious story about a girl with depression who commented how her friends did not understand that even if she suffered from this illness, she could have good moments, weeks or even months, in which you would not even guess that she had depression. Her friends, like me, thought about this when someone says that she has depression, and maybe not in this. It is true that lately it's been trying to change that vision precisely with what I just did, but it doesn't help at all, it's more confusing. Those images, articles and videos that put a sad person on the screen and say that she is really fine, and then a laughing person is having a very bad time. Good intentions, I suppose, but they just simplify it. On the one hand, they ignore that severe depression is episodic, coming and going at irregular intervals. That is, no matter how bad she is, she will necessarily have some time where she can be minimally a person, but this doesn't mean that she has been cured, nor that she cannot relapse again. On the other hand, each person is a universe, and there are those like this girl who specialize in ensuring that no one notices that they are wrong. People who don't want others to see for even a moment how damaged they are. Don't ask them questions, don't treat them differently. As I said, a perfect strategy to avoid questions, but not to feel better. The typical thing about faking it until you are it doesn't work. They might also not do it on purpose. They might be so afraid of these depressive thoughts that they try to hide them only for themselves. And unless you are actively looking for signs, you would never realize that that person is wrong, and they will live their entire life feeling that this is normal. But be very careful with this point, because whoever wants to see ghosts will see ghosts. It is easy to find false positives and confuse the ups and downs of life with clinical states. We love to see patterns when we want to make sense of something, when we strive to find a connection. That is why we see ghosts when we are scared, we hear voices in random sounds when you think they have said something beforehand, we see faces everywhere, believe that if the ball has landed 26 times on the black, it is more likely that on the next roll it will fall in red. You would be making the mistake of the Texas sniper if you focus focus on the traits and actions that would make you think that person has depression. But if you see the general image, I would tell you that there is nothing there. There are no ghosts, there are no psychophonies, and after hitting the black 500 times, red will no longer be likely. The Texas Sniper thing is an illusion. It is created when you focus on a small areas of data and try to give it an isolated explanation. The name itself is an example. That person in Texas stands in front of a blank wall and shoots randomly 100 times. Then he draws a target in that area where the shots have been most concentrated and he calls himself a sniper. If you only take into account the target, it will seem that way. Generally, if there is a reason for this discomfort, such as the death of a family member, that person will of course be depressed, sick, not just because it happens. Whether or not you will develop the disease will be seen over time. When the source of the discomfort has gone or softened, when you see that even though everything is in order in your life, you continue to experience the anguish that accompanies tragedies. The thing is that since her friends had that image of depression, she unconsciously saw herself acting the way they expected her to act, not allowing herself to express joy or well-being for fear that they would think that it wasn't as serious or even worse than what she made up. Does it sound familiar to you? This situation is very common. On the internet we have had some similar cases. First, they are accused of wanting to attract attention by being a drama queen, and when the unthinkable finally happens, they see reality that depression is not what you imagine. It's much worse. It destroys you and others are unable to see it. If they don't see you crying in black and white, it won't be a big deal. You start to doubt yourself. Are they right? Could it be that everyone feels like me and I am the one who doesn't know how to handle it? Could it be that I am weak? What do I have to do? Behave like an adult? No, it is not purely a question of attitude. It is a chemical imbalance in the brain, which is why antidepressant medications are so effective. It helps the brain regulate those chemicals that depression has disrupted, including dopamine, perhaps the most problematic, because it is what primarily regulates the desire to do things. But not only that, it also intervenes in the learning capacity based on positive reinforcement, mood, and movement. This is not important now, but it will be important later when I return to the topic of dopamine. Now it is enough to know that without adequate levels of dopamine, serotonin, and this, which I can pronounce well, you will feel that you have no energy. You don't feel like getting out of bed. You will not feel like eating because you will not feel hungry, and you will not be able to feel gratification whatever you do, thus losing interest in everything around you. You will not want to go out, clean, or talk to anyone. It will be very difficult for you to concentrate, speaking in a low tone, wanting not to disturb, and your way of moving will be slower, heavier, and that is the classic image of depression. You can find some kind of distraction, watching a movie, or no, I don't feel like it. Before I used to really like to go see a movie or play or anything, but now I don't have any kind of desire. I don't care about anything. Thanks to that, you realize how cruel it can be, because it makes you feel like you don't feel like doing anything. Those things that would normally give you those chemicals, they don't give them to you. And if, for example, you don't feel like talking to anyone, you will isolate yourself, throwing the greatest source of dopamine, which is socializing. This point is important. You know that there are people who tolerate pain better, right? There are those who get a tattoo and come out saying that they didn't feel anything, and there are those who seem to be being tortured. The fact is that even if the first person doesn't suffer, they both receive the same damage. They have both pierced their skin, they will bleed a little, and if they don't take care of it properly, it can get infected. Just because you haven't felt the process doesn't mean you haven't suffered the damage. The same thing happens with those of us who are used to being alone. Although they can spend much longer in isolation without feeling bad, they are still harming themselves. This is where antidepressants come in, and even more importantly, therapy. It happens that if you took that drug without therapy, of course you would feel better, but it will not solve what causes you to have depression. And when your body generates resistance, you will be worse than at the beginning. And is the medication necessary? Yes, if the depression is moderate or severe, of course. Keep in mind that if you try to do therapy in bad state, what will happen that you won't feel like doing anything. Even if you surprisingly go to the therapist appointments, you will still be trapped in the vicious cycle of not doing things because you don't enjoy them, and if you don't enjoy them, why do them? When you have been in that state for a long time, it is difficult to remind the brain what it feels like to be well. What is the closest thing to what you call happiness? The medication will help you feel good and feel motivated and eager to do things, but it will be therapy that will lead to a more stable way of life. Not having the desire to do anything is worse than it seems, because if it lasts long, the will to live will also disappear over time. It is a common thought in serious cases. Death makes them see that life has no meaning, and do you know the best? They are right. As I mentioned at the beginning, the fact that you are alive is certainly a miracle, but a mathematical one. You were not chosen, it just happened, like the creation of this planet with no purpose other than to exist. If depression is a poison for the mind, it is not because what they think is a lie, but because it distorts the way of facing it. Of course, existence has no meaning of its own. It is you who has to give it to it, and it can be literally anything as long as it makes sense to you. If you are waiting for the universe to conspire to magically bring you that meaning, keep waiting. They feel empty because the world doesn't give them anything because of this chemical imbalance. They feel like monsters because no matter how hard they try, they cannot enjoy always bad thoughts. Depression is a black hole capable of absorbing everything good around it and making it disappear. It is not an analogy just to say, it truly is capable of dragging others into misery. Here I return to one of those 2 points I said before, distraction as a solution. It is common for patients with depression to feel better when they surround themselves with mentally healthy people. It feels like that positive energy rubs off on them, but it is temporary, and it is not a real help, it is just a distraction. You feel better only because you are momentarily not trapped in your own thoughts, but as soon as you are alone again, you will be back to where you were at the beginning. A person with depression who surrounds himself with healthy people hoping to improve is continuing to believe that the solution is external and doesn't depend on you. Like someone who waits all eternity for the world to give meaning to their life, they hope to be infected by the well-being of others. On the one hand, having to deal with untreated depression is also hard on the environment because it slowly drains your energy. If every time you propose something you know that it is an automatic no, over time you will stop asking. The mere fact of being close will hurt them because, as many say, they stop caring about the people they love. How long can you be with a person who you perceive doesn't care about you? No matter how much you know it is a disease, you will distance yourself. It is not cruelty. It is normal. As this girl said in an interview, when she moved in with her boyfriend, things didn't go well because she felt like she was no longer trying as hard as she should to make it work. Her depression made her constantly blame herself for anything bad that happened, with or without reason. So over time, they end up breaking up. The support of those who are close is obviously important, but they are not the solution. If you don't do something on your own, it will get worse. And when you see that the patience of those around you is giving a pulse to your depression, you will be scared. Because patience has a limit, depression does not. Now about the second point, why does your mind try to attack you so insistently? Although it might seem incredible, our mind continually tests us to check that we are okay. One of those attacks that your mind always makes are intrusive thoughts. No matter how unpleasant the sensation may be, it has its uses. Your mind mind tests you to check that everything works, that you distinguish what is right, your capacity for self-control. In this way, in a healthy person, when they have this intrusion, they will in turn activate the region whose function is to detect errors and control emotions. Basically, you will think that this intrusion is crazy and you have no reason to worry. However, the mind is not prepared to stop if something goes wrong, so it will continue to attack even if there is no defense. In depression, these thoughts are perceived as evidence that they are monsters, because a healthy person would not think so many crazy things. And they have reasons to believe it by not quickly detecting what an error is. It is given more importance than it has. The fear of intrusion lasts long enough to be able to judge yourself for having it and feel afraid and ashamed, believing that you are like that. The intrusion begins to be perceived as your own thought, attributing it to a trait of your personality, and sooner or later the fleeting idea of quickly turning the steering wheel while driving will pass. Those who have depression are tormented by it. They feel them more intensely, trying to find meaning in an automatically generated thought. The mind has just become distressed in a very gratuitous way, and the worst thing is that since it has not been able to solve it, it will repeat it more frequently than usual. It is a real torture because it will not stop until you understand that these intrusions are not your own thoughts. There are ways to reduce these thoughts with therapy, but they will never completely go away, basically because everyone has them and they are still useful. So more than wanting not to have them or learning to distract yourself to avoid them, you have to learn not to judge yourself for having them, and by understanding this you will reduce the frequency and intensity. Only in this way will they reduce the anguish and anxiety they generate. Anxiety, the inseparable couple of depression. We are not talking about 100% of the cases, but we are talking about 90%. Whichever confers clinical depression or anxiety, you are practically guaranteed to develop the other. Depression and anxiety continue to be very invisible diseases despite all efforts. Not because it is not given the medical importance it has, since it was classified as a disease of the mind, and it was possible to see and quantify that there was a decrease in neurotransmitter activity. We stopped talking about crazy people and started talking about sick people. It is the patients who find it most difficult to take the first steps. With the data they had in 2013 in Australia, they saw that almost half of this year's patients had already developed the disease a long time ago. It's just that they didn't seek help either out of shame or because they believed that it was a bad time and they could get over it. Like this girl, she had been gradually getting worse for some time, spending more and more time at home, realizing that she was avoiding making mistakes. She didn't answer the phone and then it got worse. But even when she completely isolated herself for 4 months and felt like nothing mattered to her, she still didn't seek for help. If she finally did it, it's because her husband saw that it wasn't just a bad time. There is still another category here. I wouldn't know where to include it. Those who abandon treatment because it doesn't work, either because they don't fully respond to the medication or because the therapy itself doesn't lead anywhere. Two common complaints. The first, although common, can be also solved more or less quickly by changing the medication. The second is a little more exasperating for the patient, because the nature of therapy is never to tell you what you have to do, and many perceive that there is no help, and if you have to do everything yourself, why go? But it is logical that it be done that way, because they cannot intervene directly in the patient's life and take responsibility for the consequences. Yes, the advice is harmless. Yes, of course, do more exercise. Try to not stay up until 7 in the morning, but it will never be forced. Don't you want to exercise? Okay. Do you want to sleep at 7 in the morning and get up at 6 in the afternoon? Okay. Avoid giving too much importance to isolated things, because if the patient does something well, it is reducing everything around it to absurdity, to limits where it loses importance. So when the patient sees that no matter how much exercise he does, it will not make him feel better, he will stop doing it. When he sees that he doesn't improve by getting up early, he will stop doing it. If as a patient with depression say, I don't feel like doing anything because nothing matters, then nothing achieved externally is the solution. Something has deeply damaged change the way they conceive the world at such a deep level that the brain has stopped doing its job. If you cannot change that way of perceiving the world, no lasting change will be achieved, and the only thing the medication will do is treat the symptoms in a limited way until your body gets used to it. The fact is that those who are easily blocked by indecision or desperation will expect to find a step-by-step manual that the psychiatrist will never give them, because you are not there to be told what to do with your life, but to learn to face the result of your experiences. Open your options, realize what ways of acting or thinking are those that are harming you, and look for alternatives. Learn to realize when you are polarizing, if you tend to see things as good or bad, friends or enemies without gray, if you generalize frequently, if you have a fatalistic view of life, believing that something bad has happened to you even though there is no reason to think so, if you feel like you always know what others think of you and react based on that belief before they open their mouth, if you feel responsible for things you shouldn't, or if on the contrary you hold others responsible for your decisions, if you use overly exaggerated expressions when you don't like something and don't play the good things, all complicated to deal with because they are created based on lived experiences. There are many forms of distorted thoughts, and certainly many of them don't negatively influence your life. That is the role of the therapist to distinguish which ones are harming you. In your case, it takes longer and sometimes they can get confused. They are human too. It requires effort. There is nothing magical behind it. If you expect them to say the exact combination of words that will make you reach nirvana, you will be disappointed. That is why many leave it, because, as is often heard, it is useless. It helps, yes, but it is not an exact science. The same procedure in similar cases will give two different results. There are many aspects that cannot be controlled and ruin the treatment. What if the psychiatrist has a tone of voice that reminds you of a person you hate? What if the patient has felt with or without reason that you were not paying attention? That is what psychology offers you: slowness, inaccuracy, things that might or might not work, and a lot of work on your part. Very discouraging, right? Especially if we remember that the patient has depression. But it is so because, above all, it is realistic. There is nothing worse than telling him that he will get better in a short time, because he most certainly won't, and he will feel worse thinking that he will never be able to get better, more distress for an already distressed person. Looking at it this way, you understand why life coaches have become so famous. They promise you everything that psychology is reluctant to give. Time limit, transform your life in 21 days, accompanied by one of the most questionable smiles I have seen lately, telling you what you have to do. They create a life plan taking into account all the important aspects, professional, personal, loving, and it is like the manual of good living. Results, they assure you of a change, a transformation with practical tools, and you know that it is very good when the solution is in capital letters and highlighted in blood. That's marketing and basic, by the way. As savvy as they are, they continue to exist because being told directly what to do is comfortable. But keep in mind that these coaches don't focus on curing or treating anything. They just repeat motivational phrases that they have read or heard before, like the overused phrase "fake it until you are it," although rather it is "pretend until others believe it." But as I say, it is very attractive that it is presented to you in a formula, and the more restrictive it is and the less for interpretation it has, the better. Another example that you might have seen over the years is dopamine detox. They said and say that our daily lives are overloaded with activities that secrete excess dopamine, which is true. Watch a movie, listen to music, socialize, spend time on social media, eat, exercise, play, read. Almost everything you do causes a release of dopamine. It happens that if you overload the brain with too many activities with a strong and immediate reward, it will block itself, generating resistance, and you will stop feeling gratification and therefore be motivated by smaller activities. This is the good part. It is obvious that all those activities that provide more gratification and are more immediate will overshadow those where the reward is small or distant. It is impossible for you to enjoy a walk in the mountains if your brain is used to constant and aggressive stimulation from other more powerful sources, like technology. The basis of all addiction, but applied to a lifestyle. Seeing it as the basis of the problem, not focusing on the source, whether it's games, food, social media, smoke, everything is put on the same level. In this detox, you would have to eliminate all those activities for a time to reset the brain and trick it, so that it likes hard work, as they say. And using the word trick is not a coincidence, it is a way of saying shortcut or easy way. With this, the brain would be receptive again, and those activities that did not motivate you before because they were insignificant in their chemical reward would now have more strength. Okay, but isn't what I just said very different from saying to be a millionaire you just have to earn a lot of money? You are not lying, but small details are still missing. First, some say it shows in 24 hours, those who are still discovering the placebo effect. Others say a couple of days, the same as the first. Others say a week, and to be realistic, you might notice something after 2 or 3 weeks. That's a problem, but not the one I want to focus on. There is another more obvious one. Assuming you do it long enough to really notice it, it wouldn't help much either, because you have to change your behavior from scratch. Because magically you won't have become a responsible consumer. You will have your phone in your hand again, and a lot of dead hours ahead of you that Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, TikTok and others will be happy to fill. Junk food will continue to be more addictive, and playing a video game is more fun than taking a walk. You know, a diet is good when you don't see it as such and you can maintain it throughout your life. It is not an effort, it is not Operation Bikini, it's a balance between what you like and what you should eat. You keep it from summer to summer. The same here, if you don't change your behavior to be able to maintain it always, it will become a constant battle between your willpower and the stimulations of the modern world. Let's see who gets tired first. So all this dopamine detox is nothing more than telling you what is the problem with the overstimulation, which was already known, but it adds a kind of attempted solution which at most serves to give yourself a break, but not to cause a lasting change if the bad habit is not eliminated, and that requires more effort than a break. Trying things that might or might not work, you won't know how long it will take. Yes, depression is complicated. In the most serious cases, it poisons the mind, making nothing matter, nothing enjoyable. Trying hard stop making sense, and because of that, the world around you becomes simplified to dangerous levels, and death makes everything before it meaningless. Was there nothing you could enjoy? Absolutely nothing. There was no one I was happy to see, no one could say anything to cheer me up. However, I could still tell jokes. Many in the hospital when I was admitted didn't understand it. Even the psychiatrist thought I was fine. There was one nurse in particular who thought I should not be admitted, and she even criticized me for it, saying that nothing was wrong with me, that I didn't have to have that expression on my face. And I believe her. I believe that I simply had to behave like a man. Just get over it and move on, and I'd feel worse. Before my depression, I had better and worse times like everyone else, but there are no words to describe the difference between the ups and downs of the daily life and depression. In a bad time, you know that sooner or later you will be better, you will see the sunshine and you will cheer up. But in this type of depression, it doesn't matter if it is day or night, if it is raining or not. There is only darkness. I used to say, what's the point of getting up? What's the point of eating if one day I am going to die anyway? What's the point of doing nothing? There is an old saying that said, the worst part of hell is not the flames, but the loss of all hope. Someone with depression knows well what it means.